Welcome to the Last Transmission podcast, the signal that breaks through the silence, where technology, prophecy, and lost knowledge converge. In our very first episode, we travel beneath the sands of Giza to explore mind-blowing new claims about a massive underground city, hidden chambers, and forgotten dynasties. Are these recent discoveries true breakthroughs, or carefully crafted illusions? With tech like synthetic aperture radar and muon scanning revealing what lies deep below, we ask, what's real, what's hidden, and why now? This isn't just history, this is a coded warning. Stay tuned.
Okay, so you know how there's just something about the pyramids, right? Like, they just grab your attention, that scale, the mystery. And it seems like every other week there's some new theory or discovery about them.
Yeah, it's like they never get old.
They really don't. So today, we're diving into some of the latest stuff, the really interesting claims and findings that have been popping up, especially about what might be hidden underneath them.
Yeah, we've got a great collection of articles and research to dig into, some really captivating discoveries and some evolving interpretations, let's say.
Right. We want to sort of cut through the noise a bit for everyone and help make sense of it all.
Absolutely. We're going to unpack all of this, figure out what's really exciting and what might be a bit more speculative, shall we say.
Exactly. We want those light bulb moments for you, but without, information overload.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's jump right in. One of the biggest things that caught my eye was this whole underground city idea. The report that came out in March.
Yes. The claims from Corrado Malanga and Filippo Biondi definitely got people talking.
It did. So remind me, how did they even go about looking for something like that?
They use this technology called synthetic aperture radar, SAR. Basically, it's like sonar, but for the ground, sending signals down and then analyzing the echoes to figure out what's down there. They actually took it a step further, though, and turned it into what they called phonic data, which they then interpreted.
So like an underground X-ray kind of thing?
Sort of, yeah. And according to their reports, they found some pretty remarkable stuff. First, they said they found these 5 small, previously unknown, room-like structures right in the center of one of the pyramids.
Okay, interesting.
And get this, one of them apparently had a sarcophagus inside. So, of course, initially, everyone thought, oh, this must be the pharaoh's tomb.
Right, makes sense.
But then they said these rooms were connected to pathways that went much deeper underground.
Ooh, okay, so more than just a few rooms. This is where it starts getting really interesting.
Exactly. So this is where the whole underground city idea comes in. They claim to have found this massive underground structure that extends for thousands of feet. And here's where it gets even crazier. They said they found 8 of these huge vertical shafts like wells, over 6,500 feet across and going down about 2,000 feet.
2,000 feet? Hold on, that's like deeper than most skyscrapers are tall.
I know, right? And they said these shafts weren't just random either. They believed they were positioned under each of the 3 main pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure.
Wow. Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around the scale of this.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. And it gets even more complex. They think these shafts are connected by spiral pathways that lead to these 2 massive cube-shaped structures at the bottom of each shaft, like 80 meters each. They think these cubes might be access points to this whole underground system.
Okay, now this is starting to sound like something out of a movie.
Right, but wait, there's more. They also said they found evidence of even more structures, even deeper down, at like 4,000 feet.
4,000 feet? That's almost 3/4 of a mile underground.
Yeah. And the project spokesperson, Nicole Sicolo, she didn't hold back. She called it a huge underground city, 10 times bigger than the pyramids themselves.
Wow.
And she even linked it to, the Halls of Amenti from Egyptian mythology, that whole legend about Thoth and the Hall of Records.
Okay, so they're making some pretty big claims and tying it into mythology too. But this has to be controversial, right?
Oh, yeah. A lot of other experts are really skeptical about all of this. I mean, 2,000 feet, 4,000 feet underground, that's a long way down.
Yeah, that does seem pretty hard to believe.
Right. Like a researcher from the University of Denver, he's pretty blunt. He basically said these claims are exaggerated and questioned whether the SAR technology could even work that deep, especially with the kind of rock and conditions around Giza.
So the technology itself might not be able to see that far down.
That's what he's saying. And then there's this radar expert, Lawrence Conyers. He said finding those 5 shallower rooms, that's plausible. There's been a lot of human activity in that area, even before the pyramids, but a whole city thousands of feet down. He's not buying it. He thinks SAR is really good at finding things close to the surface, like within a few meters in solid rock. But any deeper than that, and it gets really unreliable.
So he's basically saying the physics just doesn't add up.
Pretty much. He even said the only way to really know what's down there is to dig, to do targeted excavations. You know, good old-fashioned archaeology.
Get your hands dirty.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's Zahi Hawass, the former Minister of Antiquities.
Oh, yeah, he's not shy about sharing his opinions.
He was really clear. He flat out denied any of these structures exist, especially under Khafre's pyramid, called the claims baseless, and said there's just no scientific evidence. He even said that no radar or other modern technology has been used to look for anything like this under the Khafre pyramid.
So according to him, they're basically making it up.
He seems to think so, yeah. And another expert, Dr. Hussein Abdel Basir, from the Antiquities Museum at the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, he called it exaggeration and deception. He pointed out that the techniques they're talking about, like GPR and seismic analysis, they can only go down a few dozen meters at most, so 2,000 feet, 4,000 feet. He basically said that's science fiction.
Yeah, it's a huge difference.
Right. And he also brought up that Corrado Malonga, one of the researchers, has done work on UFOs in the past. So some people are questioning, how seriously to take his archaeological interpretations.
Okay, so that does raise some eyebrows.
It does. And here's the big thing. This whole study, it hasn't been peer-reviewed yet. So other experts haven't had a chance to really scrutinize it.
It's kind of a red flag, isn't it?
It is. So basically this underground city idea, it's super intriguing, but right now it's mostly speculation. The science just isn't there to back it up.
Okay, so let's move on to some discoveries that are a little more, shall we say, grounded. What about the big void inside the Great Pyramid? That was discovered using muography, right? Can you remind us how that works?
Sure. Muography, it's kind of wild. It uses these tiny particles called muons. They're coming from space all the time, just bombarding the Earth. And by putting detectors around, and even inside the pyramid, they can track how these muons pass through. Denser material absorbs more muons. So they can basically create a 3D density map of the inside of the pyramid. And that's how they found this big void.
So it's like a giant X-ray, but using particles from space? That's pretty cool.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And then remember, they got that tiny camera, an endoscope, into a small opening. And they found this corridor with a really interesting chevron ceiling that seems to lead toward the void.
Right. So what do they think this void is?
Well, nobody knows for sure. Some people think it was built to relieve pressure inside the pyramid, because it's so massive. Others think it might have been a construction ramp that was just left there. And of course, there's the exciting possibility that it leads to hidden chambers.
Ooh, hidden chambers. Now we're talking.
I know. But even if it's just for structural support, it shows how incredibly smart those builders were, figuring out how to deal with all that weight.
Yeah, truly incredible. And it makes you wonder, right? Were the pyramids more than just tombs?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
There are a lot of alternative theories out there. Like, did you know Nikola Tesla thought the Great Pyramid might have been some kind of giant energy transmitter?
Really? Tesla, the electricity guy?
Yeah, he was convinced. And some people who believe this theory point to the granite in the King's Chamber. Granite has these special properties. It can convert mechanical energy, like vibrations, into electrical energy. It's called piezoelectricity. So imagine the granite in the King's Chamber. If there were vibrations, maybe even from earthquakes, it could potentially create a small electrical charge.
Interesting. But I'm guessing this is one of those ideas that most experts don't really take seriously.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a fringe theory. But there are other alternative theories that have a bit more evidence behind them, like the water management system they found at Djosir's Step Pyramid.
Oh yeah, that was fascinating. Tell me more about that.
So they're finding more and more evidence that the ancient Egyptians at the Step Pyramid really knew how to manage water, that dry moat around the pyramid. It might have been more than just a defensive feature. They think it was used to collect and treat water. Some researchers even think they might have had a hydraulic lift system powered by water to help them build the pyramid.
Wow, a hydraulic lift system thousands of years ago. That's impressive.
It really is. And then, of course, there's the alignment of the Great Pyramid. It's almost perfectly aligned with the cardinal points, north, south, east, west. It's so precise.
Yeah, you can't help but wonder how they did that.
One theory is that they used the autumnal equinox, when the day and night are equal lengths. At that specific time, they could have figured out true north and south really accurately just by watching the sunrise and sunset.
Makes you realize how advanced their astronomy was.
Absolutely. They
Yeah.
were really paying attention to the sky.
It's amazing what we're still learning about them. And speaking of learning, what about this whole Abydos dynasty thing? It sounds like there was a whole chunk of early Egyptian history that we were basically missing.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Excavations at Abydos have been shedding light on this period that for a long time was a total mystery. They're finding tombs of kings like Senep who were completely unknown before. This was a time of a lot of upheaval, political chaos, and it seems like it just got kind of left out of the historical record.
So they're piecing together this lost chapter of history through archaeology.
Exactly. And that's why these material remains are so important. They're filling in the gaps, telling us about these misunderstood periods.
And what about those ancient boats they found at Abydos? Weren't those incredibly old?
Yeah, those are incredible. 14 boats, perfectly preserved, about 5,000 years old. They're calling it the oldest fleet in human history.
That's mind-blowing.
They were buried in these special vaults really carefully. So it seems like they had some kind of symbolic or ritual purpose, probably connected to the afterlife and the sun god Ra.
Right, the journey of the pharaoh's soul.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And there was also that lost city discovery, right? The city of Ataman. That was a big deal.
Huge. They found it in 2020, and it's been called the most important discovery since King Tut's tomb. It dates back 3,000 years to the reign of Akhenaten. And it's giving us a glimpse into everyday life back then. Their homes, their workshops, all sorts of amazing detail.
That's amazing. It's like stepping back in time.
It really is. And it's not just the big discoveries. There are all these smaller things that are also fascinating. Like, did you know there are some people who think the ancient Egyptians might have had early forms of automation? Like, maybe even robots.
Robots. Come on, really?
I know, it sounds crazy, but there are these artifacts that some people interpret that way. And then there's the engineering of the pyramids themselves, obviously incredibly advanced. And they even had things like toothbrushes and toothpaste.
Is it Egyptian toothpaste? I love that.
Right. And then there are all their religious beliefs, like they would put golden tongues in monies. They had temples to this god, Zeusamon, who was a combination of Greek and Egyptian gods. And then there's this thing called the Saqqara bird.
Some people think it might be a model of an ancient aircraft, but that's pretty far out there.
Yeah, I'll stick with the toothpaste. It's all so fascinating, though, and it reminds me, we sometimes forget that pyramids weren't just an Egyptian thing.
Right. Oh, absolutely. There are pyramids in Sudan, in Mesopotamia, they had ziggurats, and of course in the Americas. So it makes you wonder, did they all come up with this idea independently, or was there some kind of shared knowledge in the ancient world?
A great question. It's kind of blowing my mind to think about how connected those ancient cultures might have been. I know, right? And it's these modern technologies that are letting us see these connections more clearly. Satellite imagery, radar, GPR, all these ways of seeing beneath the surface without digging.
Yeah, it's a golden age of archaeology in a way. So as we wrap up here, what are some of the key takeaways for you? Especially considering the contrast between those, let's say, ambitious claims about the underground city and the more solid discoveries.
Well, I think the underground city is a great example of how we need to be careful about getting carried away. It's a great story, and it sparked a lot of interest. But the evidence just isn't there right now. We need more research, more data, more scrutiny from experts.
They'll believe everything you read.
Right. But then you have these other discoveries, like the Big Void, the Abydos dynasty, the city of Aten, all these things that are really pushing our understanding of ancient Egypt forward. And they're based on solid science, careful research.
So be excited about the possibilities, but keep a critical eye.
Exactly. And remember, archaeology is a process. It's about asking questions, testing ideas, being open to new evidence. Sometimes the most amazing discoveries are the ones we least expect.
Well said. So to leave everyone with something to ponder, here's a thought. With all these amazing technologies we have now, and with all the stories and legends that have been passed down for centuries, who knows what we might find next? What if some of these more out-there theories turn out to have a grain of truth to them? We might be on the verge of discoveries that completely change how we see ancient Egypt.
The possibilities are endless, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep questioning, keep wondering. Who knows what secrets are still waiting to be uncovered?
The deeper we look, the more the past begins to speak. From ancient voids to forbidden dynasties, we've only scratched the surface. As synthetic tech peels back the layers of time, one thing is clear. The truth is out there, but it's buried deeper than we imagined. Thanks for listening to the Last Transmission podcast. where the past warns the future. If this episode sparked something in you, subscribe, share, and follow us for more uncoverings. Because next time, the signal might be even stranger. Until then, stay awake, stay aware, and never stop digging.